Hello, students. Dr. Nathanson here. I hope everyone is well. Uh, in this talk, I want to talk a little bit about teams and the importance of teams. Some of you might think that you'd rather work, you know, by yourself than with others, and I understand that. But learning to work with teams is a really good skill. Learning to work with teams will help you in your personal relationships, with your communication skills. Often when you're on a team, you have to, kind of decide, and this is where self-awareness comes into place. You have to decide, is this a good time for me to speak up? Is this a good time for me to maybe ask questions of another teammate who for whatever reason is shy and is not contributing? And so being on a team is exactly like being in a relationship. There's a lot of give and take. There's lots of nonverbal observation skills that are needed, and so on. So I encourage all of you, especially those who, maybe you don't like working on teams, to kind of have an open mind. Years ago, it used to be that, especially at work, it wasn't necessarily mandatory to always work in teams. You could sit in your office or your cubicle and just pretty much work on your own activities. But these days, you really can't escape the importance of working in teams, and that's what's called a paradigm shift in business. And a paradigm shift is when one day everybody thinks, for example, back in 1600s, that the world is flat, and then Galileo says, sorry, but I've just proven that the world is round. And people go, oh, of course the world is round. So we've had a paradigm shift when it comes to the importance of working in teams. So what are some of the characteristics of teams? I think to work on a team, each individual has to have, a combination of self-awareness, problem-solving skills, communication skills, and so on. And I think as these different skills intertwine between individuals, that leads the way to team success. Now, there is a difference between a group and a team. For example, when I'm teaching a class, I will say to the class that, our class is a group. So as a group, we have, goals for the class that each individual is accountable for. So for example, your grade in your class is really mostly dependent on your work. But when you're on a team, it's really a shared activity. You are accountable to the team. And that's where accountability shifts from you to the collective, as I like to call it. And so the team has its own purpose, its own missions, and so on. And so the effectiveness is really judged by how the team does. And then, of course, there's lots of teams, as I've shown you here: advice teams, production teams, all kinds of different types of teams that you'll have an opportunity to contribute on. So here's a nice definition I like to discuss. A team is a small number of people. I think the best number for teams are, less than 8. I've found that when teams get bigger than 8, they get much harder to coordinate. So team is a small number of people, less than 8, that have complementary skills. And that's why it's important that the team leader of any team, before any new project, inventories each person and ask, hey, what are you good at doing? What do you want to do? What are you interested in doing? And so the team leader can delegate, the right tasks. The worst thing is for a person to be on a team and be stuck with a task or a project that they're not good at and they don't really like to do. So a team is a small number of people with complementary skills who are committed to a common purpose and common goals, and they're mutually accountable to the team. I think that's an important distinction to make. Studies have shown that, teams outperform individuals, which is sort of makes common sense, right? And so there is a benefit in most activities in having teams. Also with teams, you integrate learning. If 4 people don't know what to do, maybe the 5th person does know what to do, and you're able to integrate learning. I've given some funny and interesting videos to look at here on your own, to give you some examples of good teams and not so good teams. So on your own, I'd like you to click and look at these. So one model I like to teach is called the Tuckman Model. It's been around, I think, since the late 1960s, and it's a really simple model to understand, and it seems to work. And I think this is a good model for kind of thinking about not only team structure and process, but what does it really take for a team to be successful? So let's go through the stages, and as I do, since this is a virtual talk, I would like you to think about the current teams that you're on. What phase is your team at, and what do you need to do to bring it to the next phase? And this would be a good exercise to do as well. So the first phase of any team process is called forming. So that's when people get together, they define their goals, and everybody has a sense of, okay, this is what we're here to do. So what's interesting to point out is if a team does not clarify, this really has to come from the leader. If a team does not clarify during the forming stage what the vision is, then the team is never going to move to the second stage. And you've probably been on teams like that before, or you've been in a class where the whole class goes by and you're wondering, scratching your head, like, what are we really trying to accomplish here? Once leadership defines the vision of where we want to go and how we want to get there with regards to goals, the team is ready to move forward, sort of naturally to storming. And by the way, these stages that I'm going through, they could take an hour, they could take a day, a month, a year. So it's really independent of time. It just depends on how fast the group can move. But the point is, they're sequential, but they can be quick, or they can be very slow. So storming is when, storming has two extremes. At one extreme, there's just, a lot of disagreement, yelling, screaming. Nobody's getting along, right? And at the other extreme, it could be just when one person, one member on the team has a question, raises his hand and says, hey, I'm a little confused. So that's also considered storming. If a person's question isn't answered to their satisfaction, all it takes is one person to kind of mentally drop out of the storming phase. And really, by definition, this group can go backwards to forming. So keep in mind that at any stage of this process, of this model, of the Tuckman model, you can go forward, but you can also go back. So during the storming phase, it's important that the leader, for example, kind of goes around the group and says, do you have any questions? Do you have any questions? How are you doing? And only when everyone understands and is willing to kind of move ahead together can the group move to the third stage. And the third stage is called conforming. It's also called norming. This is a stage when people get it. Each person understands their role. They understand the team's vision. Trust is starting to occur. At this point, I think it's a good idea or any point really, but especially at the conforming stage, for teams to have some social events that are healthy and positive to help, the group work together better. So at conforming, people are kind of clear. And again, at this stage, if people all of a sudden aren't sure about their role, don't feel committed, there's no trust, guess what? The team could fall all the way back to storming and even back to forming. So at the conforming stage, if the team has a pretty good idea of where they're going and why, they move to, of course, the fourth stage, which is called performing. At this stage, the team feels good, right? It's like a basketball team in the fourth quarter. They were down by 10 points, and now they're up by 4 points, and people are passing, and people are, helping each other out, and there's not that many turnovers, using a basketball analogy. Well, the same thing happens at the performing stage. There's really a growing awareness of what I like to call the team's core competence. Trust is high, and so on. But again, just like in a basketball game, if the team is ahead by 10 points and all of a sudden they start making errors and turnovers and fouls, and they start losing by 6-8 points, just like that, it could happen, right? They move back to conforming. Okay, where are we? We're down by 6 points. What do we need to do? So performing usually means, at this point, goals are going to get met and the project is going to be successful. Years later, Tuckman added a fifth stage because he thought that it wasn't sufficient just to have 4 stages. And this fifth stage is called adjourning. At the adjourning stage, it's the celebration. It's the closure stage. I think this is a very important step, and I'm glad that he added this. When I was managing, I would have meetings after big projects, and on the board I would put plus and minus. What did we do well, what didn't we do so well, and what can we learn for this for next time. And then next time, just before we started, a new project, we would go back to this list. And so the adjourning phase is to celebrate. This is when you go out and have a nice social event. You have a process to discuss lessons learned. And this is kind of a closure. It's okay, we're done, and we move on to the next one. Just like in your personal life, when there's not closure, things hang. At one extreme, you know, like at the end of my day, I like to sit down and think about, did I accomplish what I needed to? If not, what tasks do I need to move to the next day? Where am I relative to my big vision and big projects and things that I'm working on? And if I don't have, it takes me about 15 minutes. If I don't have like 15 minutes to transition at the end of the day, I don't want to be around anybody. I'm in a bad mood because I haven't kind of transitioned, right? And the same thing is true for any project. People have to have a chance to discuss, celebrate, say, hey, this is where we could do better. This is where we did really well. Say goodbye. And then, just like my personal transition, we're ready for the next day. If the adjourning stage is not done, it's very possible. In this case, it's unlikely that the team will go backwards since the project is usually finished. But what might happen is it's disjointed. So the next time the team starts a new project, it's going to be very hard to get going because they didn't have closure. So that's really important. So that's pretty much it. That's the model I really want you to think about in this lecture. Let me go over just a few other ideas that support team development. So I think it's important, as I noted earlier, to be familiar with which stage that you're at. It's also important to anticipate problems and be proactive. Don't wait for things just to occur. And I think the more self-aware each individual on the team is, you'll be able to deal with any conflicts that that come up. So again, I would ask you on your own to get together with your team members and discuss, which stage is your team at, and what can you do as a team to move to the next stage. And this would be something that would be interesting to share. And I usually have an exercise in class that will facilitate this. To be continued. Some other attributes of effective teams, as I said earlier, a shared purpose. If there's no vision, it's like if you don't know where you're going, any road will get you there, but it probably won't be the same road. So it's important to have a vision. As I said earlier, I think assigning people tasks based on complementary skills is important. I think teams should have an informal, relaxed climate. If the leader is not self-aware and kind of sets too serious of a tone, then I think that can prohibit the team from moving faster and effectively together. I also think it's important to recognize team contributions versus individual contributions on a team. John Wooden, who is one of the most successful coaches in American history, he was the basketball coach who won multiple championships in a row while at UCLA. After they won a team, Coach Wooden would never say, it's because you score all the points, we won. He would look at every single player and said, the way you passed helped us win. The way you shot helped us win. The way you sat on the bench, even though you didn't get to play, the way you cheered us on, encouraged us, that helped us win. And so I think it's important to always focus on team contributions versus individual contributions. And I think it's important to rotate leadership. I used to do this when I was managing. I would select someone and I would say, look, you're in charge for the day or for the week. And a little bit risky, but it always worked out most of the time. And I let them make all the decisions. I was there to help. And later when the person was put back on their team, they really had a new sort of appreciation of leadership. A lot of times there'll be disagreements, and this is why teams need an effective process to resolve those differences. I like to use, for big teams, something called the nominal group process. And essentially it's a process where, you give people, you can give them like colored dots, and you let them go up and you put different alternatives on the board if you're trying to make, for example, a group decision. And you let everybody vote. Then you weigh the voting. And then sometimes as a leader, you might have to, do something that goes against the voting, but at least the idea is to get a consensus going. So any type of process for making decisions, within the team, I think is very, very important. Effective teams, again, promote achievement, trust, and cohesiveness. You know, I'm sure you've been on a team before where you just felt good about your role, and you felt good about the progress of the team. So there's a sense of what I call we-ness. Studies have shown that adults listen 50% of the time. Some of you didn't hear what I just said. And so you always have to over communicate. Always over communicate and clarify. I think the two most, just a few more points. I think the most important, two most important criteria for effective work teams. One is called performance. So at the end of any team project, it's important to, judge, how did we do? Did we meet our goals? Did we meet our clients' expectations, and so on? And then as important, maybe more important, are the groups satisfied with how they did? Because if a group is not satisfied, chances are this is going to carry on with a negative attitude towards the next project. I get this question all the time. Professor Nathanson, what do we do about so-and-so? He or she is not pulling their weight. And I usually will say, well, don't worry about it. That's not your problem. That's the leader's problem to deal with, or my problem. And I think when you have a person who's not, quote, doing their share, there's a reason. People don't get up in the morning and say, wow, it's a great day to mess up. Today's going to be the day. No, there's something wrong in the system. And so I think this is where coaching comes into play. And so I think, at some point, if a person doesn't improve, they have to be moved off the team. But initially, I've seen that most of the time, problems can be resolved with just one-on-one private coaching. Again, it's important to reward the team, give people accountability, let people know exactly what they're accountable for, and in fact, what you want them to do. It also can be kind of cool to have a team identity. In my classes, because of time, I'll say, group 1, you're group 2, you're group 3. But I think to the extent that teams can come up with their own names, whatever those names are, it might sound corny, but it sort of brings people together. It gives them a team identity. Lastly, I think it's important to have what I call pledges. It's just a simple pledge, 5 bullets. It says, on our team, we pledge to always listen to one another, to be on time, to be friendly, to be helpful, to be cheerful, to listen, to communicate our concerns, and so on. It's amazing that once a team develops a pledge, 4 or 5 bullets, and shares it, and everybody commits to follow it, I've seen it's amazing how that works. People would feel really guilty not to follow the pledge. So I really recommend that. And here's some, just agreements on what can be in a pledge. One point I want to make out, this second to last bullet, it's okay to disagree, but it's important to disagree and commit. If someone on a team disagrees and doesn't do any work, then that's going to bring the whole team down. So what you want to do is have a forum where people can disagree, but then at the end of the day, agree to, I disagree, but I'm going to commit to do whatever the team decides. I think that's important. Focused on the big picture. So that's really all I want to cover. I would like you on your own, since we have a virtual session, to think about, what is the key learning for you right now. Take a piece of paper and maybe make 3 to 5 points. What is the key learning from this lecture? How might you apply this moving forward? So until next time, I hope you enjoyed this. Hope you're having a great night or evening, and I'll see you in class soon. Okay, take care, everybody. Stay safe.